Japan continues to step up integration in defense, agreeing to pay more for U.S. troops to continue to be stationed in the country. China has slammed Tokyo and Washington for alleging Beijing is trying to undermine the rules-based order. Now, for a closer look, we're joined by Professor Joseph Siracusa. He's a political analyst from Curtin University. Professor Siracusa, the U.S. and Japan have common security concerns in the Indo-Pacific region. How equal, though, are their roles as allies in the escalation of this defense collaboration between them? Would it be an underestimation, perhaps, to view this development as the U.S. just arm-twisting its ally to show solidarity between the two?
Good evening. Well, I don't think the U.S. is actually twisting anybody's arm, but the United States spends a lot of time reassuring the Japanese that they can count on the United States in the event of a crunch. They can count on the American nuclear umbrella, which is essential to Japanese thinking. And the Japanese don't want the Americans to touch those 54,000 troops who live in Japan, which are the ultimate guarantee of getting America involved in a conflict. I mean, you can have all the theories you want and all the arms control deals you have, but if you got troops there, I mean, if the Americans were killed there, and that's why they've been there since '45, it's an automatic guarantee that the United States would get involved. Though there are many in Japan who are questioning America's resolve after 4 years of Donald Trump, which shook them to the core.
Oh, Professor, let's pick up from there. As you say, in fact, all this talk about controlling or containing Chinese moves in the Indo-Pacific. A great deal of this is Japan trying to reassure itself that its most powerful ally will stay committed to this region. Now, with this deal that another 5 years of American troops staying on, with Japan now paying more, do you think Japan is more assured now of American presence in the Indo-Pacific?
No, but it's paying the overhead cost to make sure that the Americans do stay. It's very interesting. President Biden was always complaining the Japanese and NATO members weren't paying their fair share, and that the extra 5% is coming from the request by the Biden government, which the Japanese government readily agreed to. So I think that's a very interesting development right there. Look, I heard Anthony Blinken's introduction to the virtual meeting today, talking about the threat from China and Taiwan and Ukraine and the rest of it. It's that litany he goes through in order to persuade everybody that they have to integrate in deterrence to a greater level. That's the phrase used by Secretary of Defense Lloyd. Look, I don't think Japan has to worry about China attacking Taiwan. And if it did, the United States wouldn't go to the aid of Taiwan anyway. I mean, the Shanghai Communique of 1972 took care of that. That's just not going to happen. I think the Japanese are a little nervous about Biden's new ambassador to Japan. His name is Rahm Emanuel. He is a very rough former aide to Barack Obama, and he was recently the mayor of Chicago, where I come from. These are very rough jobs. He's not very sophisticated and doesn't have a diplomatic bone in his body, so I'm not quite sure what he's going to do with the Japanese. But he's a good friend of the president, which always counts. So the Japanese are going to be looking very closely at this appointment. They would have preferred a professional diplomat. What they got instead was a political friend of the president. So we'll see how that works out.
Nonetheless, Professor Siracusa, Japan, still has concerns about developments or the escalation, perhaps, of tensions in the Taiwan Strait. It no doubt will be looking to its partnership with the United States, how robust its partnership is, and whether it is a robust enough deterrent to any of those escalations going forward. So how successful, perhaps, have Japan's leaders been at striking this right balance between being able to develop their own indigenous capabilities and also expecting support from the United States?
Well, I think they routinely expect support from the United States, in return for which Japan would play a very leading role if there were an attack from the Chinese, say in the East China Sea or some crisis in the South China Sea. I had the privilege some months ago of having breakfast with a former admiral in the Japanese Navy. The Japanese Navy is not afraid of the Chinese. They're just worried the Americans aren't going to be with them when and if the time comes they have to confront them. But I think it is a balancing act. I mean, Japan has its own interests in the area, or in these waters. It doesn't have to be over Taiwan or something like that. But the Japanese work on an interoperable basis with the United States Armed Forces. And so they're prepared to work together. I just think that in the long run, the Japanese worry about whether the Americans are going to stay and whether the nuclear umbrella is going to work. And if those two things don't happen, Japan would have to acquire a nuclear capability. Ideally, they'd like to just get the weapons from the United States and use them themselves as they see fit, but that we haven't come to that point yet. So I think the Japanese are in a bit of a delicate balancing act, but they want to keep the Americans interested and they want to keep them interoperable as much as possible.
Professor, let's pick up the two deals today. One is on the cost-sharing pact, which we have already discussed. The second, of course, is a collaboration on research and development on military technology. Because a lot of talk in U.S. military circles in the last 1-2 years saying that the way the U.S. is spending on defense is that money is not going where it should if it wants to act in the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea or the East China Sea. Now, this agreement between Japan and Australia, do you think it will go further to develop the right kinds of weapons for the right kind of war in these regions?
Well, the recent increase in the U.S. defense budget allows for billions of dollars to be spent in near China, near Japan and off of South Korea to develop this so-called pivot to Asia. So the money is there. This talk about developing weapons together and that kind of thing, that's kind of window dressing. They do that anyway. What they're trying to do is to reassure the Japanese bureaucracy and the scientific community or the military industrial complex there that they can count on the Americans. They're not looking for a breakthrough weapon here or anything. No one's worried about the North Korean hypersonic missile that they tested the other day. The Americans and the Japanese will be able to probably have that kind of thing already. So they're just worried that that people don't see this cooperation as closely as they should. I mean, America not only has to reassure the Japanese, but it has to be seen to be reassuring them. And there's no better way to do it than an integrated defense policy, which includes research and development together and that kind of thing. So in a sense, it's also an aspect of the politics of reassurance. But we're not holding out for the magic weapon or the silver bullet here or anything. It's just a gesture in the right direction. It increases collaboration, gives people trust, and trust is what the Japanese-American relationship is all about.
Professor Siracusa, thank you. That was Professor Joseph Siracusa from Curtin University.